In the evening, when the lights of his penthouse were already burning, and the city below him breathed endless streams of light and noise, Thomas Vanderlein, one of the youngest billionaires in America, received a call that made his heart fall somewhere into the darkness. "Mr. Vanderlein? This concerns your company. The government has opened an investigation. It's about fraud with financial statements." Thomas froze, clutching the phone. He knew that his company was built on aggressive investments and cunning schemes, but he always believed that they did not cross the line of the law. Or, at least, he did not want to believe it. His eyes stared into the huge panoramic window, where thousands of lights of the night New York sparkled, and suddenly it seemed to him that these were not lights, but glances, hundreds of eyes looking straight at him, waiting for him to fall. That same evening he received another piece of news. His closest partner and childhood friend, Richard, refused to get in touch. The first articles appeared in the media, leaked documents, interviews with former employees, loud headlines: "Vanderlein's empire, built on lies? It's not true. I won't let them take everything," Thomas whispered, but even his own voice seemed foreign to him. He raised his glass of whiskey, but his hands shook so that the liquid splashed onto the floor. Inside, in the deepest corner of his mind, a fear arose that he had never felt before. The fear that his grand empire was nothing more than a house of cards. And it was that night that he first felt the cold touch of loneliness, cutting through the glitter and luxury. The days turned to chaos. His company's stock price plummeted, journalists were lurking outside his office, and employees were being laid off by the dozens. Every call from the lawyers brought new blows. The prosecutor's office opened a case, and Thomas was summoned to a hearing. "They want your head, Tom. You need a scapegoat. Dump Richard, he's already betrayed you," his lawyer advised. But Thomas remained silent. He couldn't decide what hurt more, losing his money or feeling stabbed in the back by a man he trusted more than himself. Meanwhile, Richard gave a big interview in which he accused Thomas of all the shenanigans. Thousands of newspaper columns exploded with headlines: "Genius or con man?" The hero's every move was now under the spotlight. Friends shunned him, business partners refused deals. And worst of all, his mother, the woman who had always been his silent support, had said to him on the phone, "Thomas, I'm watching the news, and I don't recognize you. Tell me, is it true?" It wasn't a question. It was a sentence. He wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he had been betrayed, that it was all a game against him. But there were no words. And in that moment he realized, he had lost more than just the company or the money. He had lost his name. When everything seemed ruined, Thomas received an unexpected message. An old friend of his father's, a retired journalist, had sent him a dossier. It contained documents that indicated that Richard was the real mastermind behind the fraudulent schemes. Thomas had been framed, and framed a long time ago. They met in an old bar on the outskirts of town. "Your father always said, 'The truth hurts, but it heals,'" the journalist said, handing him a folder. Thomas flipped through the pages. There were copies of contracts, forged signatures, offshore transfers. Every line of the document weaved a conspiracy in which he was only a pawn. Something inside him snapped, but at the same time a new flame ignited. If all this was true, he had a chance. A chance not just to save his name, but to get revenge. But two voices were fighting in his soul, one screaming, "Use this, destroy him." The other whispering, "You will become just like him." For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt he had a choice. And that choice changed everything. The courtroom had become like an arena. The media was broadcasting it live, and the whole country was watching his every word. Thomas sat across from Richard, who seemed to be glowing with self-confidence. "Vanderlein is a symbol of rotten America," Richard exclaimed in his speech. "I witnessed all his crimes." But then Thomas stood up. He had the same folder in his hands. "You want the truth?" His voice trembled, but grew stronger with each word. Then listen. He laid out the evidence. Every document, every scheme. And the world saw the real thief. Richard turned pale, the lawyers shouted, the journalists almost kicked down the door to be the first to leave with a sensation. Thomas knew that even if he proved the truth, he would lose everything, the investors would not return, the empire was already in ruins. But he stood proudly. For the first time in his life, he was not saving money, but saving himself. After the trial, Thomas left the city. He settled in a small house by the ocean, far from his former glory. Every morning he went ashore and listened to the sound of the waves. His name was cleared, but he had almost no money left. One day, journalists asked him, "Do you regret the losses? The billions that are no longer yours?" He smiled, looking at the horizon. "I lost an empire, but I found myself." Sometimes true wealth is not a bank account, but the ability to look in the mirror without shame. The wind tore his words off and carried him out to sea. The finale left a question: is it possible to be rich and honest? Are empires always silent? Life by the ocean gave Thomas peace, but it seemed to him that the silence was too loud. He began to write memoirs, trying to lay out all the truth that he possessed. But one evening, a stranger in an expensive suit appeared on the doorstep. "Mr. Vanderlein, my clients are ready to offer you a deal. You have knowledge that could destroy a whole series of corporations. They are paying millions for your silence." Thomas felt old ghosts come to life. The system was trying to buy him again, to use his silence as a commodity. He was offered an easy return to luxury. But deep down, he understood that if he agreed, he would betray not only himself, but also everyone who believed in his purification. That night he lay awake for a long time, listening to the sound of the waves. He was pulled in both directions, towards the darkness that promised comfort, and towards the light that demanded pain. Thomas decided to refuse. But then new pressure began. Articles appeared in the media again, presenting him not as a hero, but as a liar. Someone wanted him to break. His memoirs began to be blocked by publishers, powerful hands would not let him speak. Why are they afraid of the truth, he asked himself, pacing the empty house. One evening he met the same stranger again. "You are a hero without an army. In a world of money, truth has no meaning unless it is backed by force. We offer you force, Mr. Vanderlein. All you have to do is sign." The man held a contract in his hand. Thomas felt his fingers tremble. Part of him wanted to sign it, not for the money, but for the sense of control he had lost. But another part knew that it would be the beginning of a new slavery. He saw his reflection in the mirror, and for the first time asked himself, what if I am no better than them? What if I am simply afraid of being nothing? On the last night, before deciding the fate of the contract, Thomas went ashore. The waves crashed against the rocks, and the starry sky reminded him of his childhood, when he dreamed of changing the world. He remembered his father, his mother, everyone he had lost. He tore the contract into small pieces and threw them into the sea. His decision was simple and at the same time the hardest in life, to live not for empire, but for truth, even if it brought nothing but loneliness. As the sun rose above the horizon, Thomas smiled. He knew that he would never be part of the big game again, but his heart was free. His last words in his diary were, "We are all temporary guests in the world of money. And the question is not how much we have collected, but what we leave behind. Empires collapse. But the truth lives on."